I wish I could tell you that things got better after that. They didn't. Not for a very long time. The first few days passed in a blur. I slept on a friend's couch, then another friend's couch, then another. I cried so much that my eyes were constantly swollen. Every morning I woke up hoping all of it had been some horrible nightmare. Every morning reality came crashing back. My fiance was gone, my family was gone, my home was gone. And somehow, despite knowing I was innocent, I still felt ashamed. I kept replaying that night over and over. Every conversation, every decision, every drink, trying desperately to find the moment where everything went wrong. The worst part wasn't even losing my family. It was realizing that none of them had fought for me. Not one, not my mother, not my father, not my sisters, not even the man who had promised to spend the rest of his life with me. 21 years. 21 years of memories. And all it took was a few photographs and one lie. For weeks, I tried to fix things. I called my fiance. No answer. I left voice messages, no response. I sent messages explaining everything. Nothing. It was like I no longer existed. Then Christmas arrived. To this day, I think that was the moment something inside me finally broke. A part of me still believed my family would come around, that once enough time had passed, they would calm down and listen. So I decided to go home. I rehearsed what I wanted to say the entire way there. I wasn't planning to argue. I wasn't planning to defend myself. I just wanted my family back. When I arrived, the house was dark. No cars, no lights, no decorations, nothing. At first, I thought I had the wrong day. Then my phone rang. It was one of my friends. Her voice sounded hesitant. Have you checked Facebook? I frowned. No, why? There was a long pause. Then she said something that changed everything. I think you should sit down first. My stomach dropped. A few moments later, she sent me the link. The first photo appeared on my screen, and I stopped breathing. My family had gone on vacation, out of state, for Christmas. My parents, my sisters, my grandparents, my ex-fiance, his parents, everyone, every single person. They were smiling, laughing, opening presents, drinking wine, taking family photos without me. The comments underneath were even worse. Beautiful family. So happy for all of you. Perfect Christmas. I sat on the sidewalk outside my childhood home and cried harder than I ever had in my entire life. Because for the first time, I realized they weren't waiting for me to come back. They weren't looking for me. They weren't worried about me. They had already moved on. I was the only one still holding on to the life we used to have. When I finally stopped crying, I did something that changed the course of my life. I blocked them, all of them. My mother, my father, my sisters, my ex-fiance, his family, everyone. Then I took off my engagement ring. For nearly an hour, I just stared at it. This ring had once represented my future. Now it felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. The next morning, I mailed it back. No note, no letter, nothing. A few weeks later, a friend told me about a restaurant several hours away. The owner needed help. The pay wasn't great. The hours were terrible, but there was a tiny apartment above the restaurant where employees could stay for almost nothing. At that point, I didn't care. I wasn't running towards something. I was running away. Away from the memories, away from the betrayal, away from the people who had abandoned me. So I packed everything I still owned into 2 suitcases and left. I didn't know it then, But that decision would save my life because for the first time since everything happened, I was finally surrounded by people who didn't already believe the worst about me. The apartment above the restaurant was barely larger than a bedroom. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The heater worked only when it felt like it. And if I stretched both arms out in the kitchen, I could practically touch both walls. For the first few nights, I cried myself to sleep. Not because of the apartment, because it was the first place I had ever lived where no one knew who I was. No one knew about my family. No one knew about the engagement. No one knew about the lies. To everyone there, I was just another employee. At first, that terrified me. Then it became the most freeing feeling in the world. The restaurant owner, Mike, was the first person in a long time who treated me like a human being. He never pushed for details, never asked uncomfortable questions, never tried to pry into my past. The only thing he cared about was whether I showed up on time and worked hard. And I did. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Partly because I needed the money, mostly because work kept me from thinking. The lunch rush, the dinner rush, closing duties, inventory, orders, cleaning. Anything was better than lying awake at night, remembering the people I had lost. Some days I worked 12 hours, sometimes more. It was exhausting. But exhaustion was easier than heartbreak. Months passed, then a year. Slowly, things started changing. The nightmares became less frequent. I stopped checking my block messages. I stopped wondering whether my fiance had changed his mind. I stopped imagining my family suddenly showing up to apologize. For the first time since everything happened, I started building a life that belonged to me, not to my family, not to my relationship, mine. Mike eventually promoted me to shift supervisor. A few months later, assistant manager. When he told me, I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. You earned it, he said. No one had said words like that to me in a very long time. You earned it. Not because someone felt sorry for me, not because they were family, not because they had to, because I had worked for it. That meant everything. The extra income allowed me to move out of the apartment above the restaurant. I still remember carrying the last box into my new condo. It wasn't huge, it wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. The first thing I did after moving in was sit on the floor in the empty living room and cry, not out of sadness, out of relief. For 2 years, every step forward had felt impossible, yet somehow I had survived. I had rebuilt my life from nothing, and while it wasn't the life I had once dreamed about, I was proud of it. Eventually, the pain became something distant. Not gone, never gone, just quieter. Like an old scar, something that still hurt when touched but no longer controlled my life. There were still moments, a song on the radio, a restaurant we used to visit, a memory appearing out of nowhere. Sometimes I would find myself thinking about my fiance, wondering if he was married, wondering if he was happy, wondering if he ever regretted what happened. Then I would force myself to stop because none of it mattered anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. The truth was more complicated. No matter how much time passed, there was one thing I could never fully let go of: the fact that he had never given me a chance. Not one. After everything we had been through together, after 21 years, he never even listened. And that hurt more than losing him. One rainy Tuesday evening, I came home after a long shift. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter and kicked off my shoes. The condo was quiet, peaceful, safe, exactly the way I liked it. I was halfway through making tea when someone knocked on my front door. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then came another knock, and another. Something about it felt strange. Reluctantly, I walked over and opened the door. The moment I saw who was standing there, the air left my lungs. For a second, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating because standing on the other side of that door was the last person I ever expected to see again, my ex fiance. And he looked just as shocked to see me as I was to see him. For a moment, neither of us moved, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other. 2 years. 2 years of silence, 2 years of anger, 2 years of unanswered questions. And suddenly he was standing in front of me as if no time had passed at all. Except time had passed. A lot of it. He looked older, tired. There were faint lines around his eyes that I didn't remember. His hair was slightly longer than he used to wear it. And there was something else. Something broken. The same thing I saw every time I looked in the mirror. The shock wore off first. Then came the anger. I immediately started closing the door. He caught it before it shut. Not aggressively, just enough to stop it. Please, his voice cracked. Just let me explain. For a second, hearing his voice almost broke me. This was the man I had planned my entire future around, the man I had imagined growing old with, the man who had abandoned me when I needed him most. I hated that part of me still cared. I hated it. Explain what? I asked. My voice sounded colder than I expected. His eyes dropped to the floor, then back to me. Nikki confessed. The world suddenly felt very quiet. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because despite everything, hearing those words still hurt. He swallowed hard. She told everyone the truth. Still nothing. My hand tightened around the edge of the door. He looked like he was struggling to breathe. I didn't know where you were. I laughed. A short, bitter laugh. The kind that isn't really laughter. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. His voice barely rose above a whisper. No, it isn't. For the first time, I saw genuine shame on his face, not guilt. Shame. The kind that stays with a person. The kind that changes them. He ran a hand through his hair. I was wrong. The words hung between us. I was so unbelievably wrong. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him exactly what those 2 years had felt like, the loneliness, the humiliation, the fear. The night spent wondering whether anyone had ever truly loved me at all. But I couldn't, because part of me had spent 2 years imagining this exact moment. And somehow it wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. What happened? I finally asked. He took a deep breath. Then he told me everything. The confession happened at Nikki's wedding. At first, everything had seemed normal. The ceremony, the reception, the speeches, the dancing. Then, late in the evening, after several drinks, someone made a joke about soulmates. According to him, something in Nikki snapped. She started crying. At first, everyone thought she was overwhelmed by the wedding. Then she stood up and admitted everything. The photos, the lies, the messages sent from my phone, the plan, the friend, everything. Every disgusting detail. Apparently, the room had gone completely silent. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew how to react. Because the story was so much worse than anyone had imagined. When she finally finished talking, nobody was looking at her anymore. They were looking at him. Because he was sitting there realizing he had destroyed the life of the woman he loved. And the worst part? According to him, he had suspected something wasn't right for years. My stomach twisted. What? His eyes filled with tears. I tried not to. What does that mean? He looked away. There were things that didn't make sense. My heart sank. What things? The messages. I stared at him. He continued. The way you supposedly wrote them. He swallowed hard. You never texted like that. I felt sick. There were other things too, like the fact that Nikki had been the only witness, the fact that her friend kept changing small details of his story, the fact that nobody had ever found any actual proof beyond what they said happened. But every time he started questioning it, Nikki would have another explanation, another excuse, another reason, and eventually he convinced himself that believing the lie was easier than questioning everything. When he said that, I felt something inside me crack. Not because I was surprised, because it confirmed my worst fear. He hadn't believed me, not because there was proof, not because he knew I was guilty, but because it was easier. The tears started before I realized I was crying. Not loud tears, not dramatic ones, just silent tears rolling down my face. His eyes immediately filled too. I know. His voice broke. I know. You knew me for 21 years. He nodded. I know. You knew exactly who I was. I know. You were supposed to know I would never do that. At that point, he completely broke down. And for the first time since I'd opened the door, I saw him cry. Not politely, not quietly. Completely. The kind of crying that comes from carrying something for far too long. I'm sorry. The words barely came out. I'm so sorry. Over and over. Again and again. But the problem was that sorry couldn't give me those 2 years back. Sorry couldn't erase sleeping on strangers' couches. Sorry couldn't erase Christmas. Sorry couldn't erase watching everyone move on without me. Sorry couldn't erase the moment he pulled his arm away and chose to believe someone else. Eventually, I wiped my eyes. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding, the question that terrified me. What did Nikki say? His expression changed. Something dark crossed his face. For the first time that evening, he looked angry. Not at me, at her. And what he told me next would completely change the way I saw my sister. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in around us. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer, but after everything that had happened, I needed the truth, no matter how ugly it was. What did she say? I asked again. He took a long breath, then slowly sat down. The look on his face scared me because it wasn't anger, it wasn't disgust, it was grief. The kind of grief you feel when someone destroys the image you had of them forever. When Nikki confessed, he began, she didn't just admit to lying. My stomach tightened. Then what? He stared at the floor. She admitted why she did it. I already knew part of the answer, or at least I thought I did. Jealousy, bitterness, resentment. But I was wrong. The truth was worse, much worse. According to him, after she started crying at the wedding reception, she admitted that she had been in love with him for years, not months. Years, maybe even longer than he realized. The room suddenly felt cold. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Because the more I looked back, the more things started making sense. The way she always defended him, the way she watched him, The way she inserted herself into our relationship, the way she seemed devastated when we announced our engagement, all the warning signs I had ignored, all the signs I never wanted to see. Apparently, she told everyone that every time she watched us together, she became more convinced that they were supposed to be together instead. Not me, her. She convinced herself that she understood him better, that she supported him more, that she appreciated him more, that she loved him more. And over time, fantasy became obsession. Obsession became resentment. Resentment became hatred. Not hatred toward him,